To the world, she was the queen of the West. Dale Evans, the woman with the perfect smile, the perfect faith, and the perfect cowboy husband. Roy Rogers. They were America's couple. A portrait of unshakable happiness. But when the cameras stopped rolling, the fairy tale ended. Biographies will tell you about her fame, but the truth is a pattern of devastating loss. A teenage mother forced to abandon her identity, a wife who felt invisible in her own marriage, a mother who had to bury not one, but two daughters. Most people would have crumbled after the first lie. Dale Evans lived with hers for 50 years. The question isn't how she became famous. It's how she managed to keep standing when her entire world kept collapsing. This isn't just a story about a cowgirl. This is the untold investigation into the woman behind the mask and the price she paid to wear it. Long before the fringe jackets in the spotlight, there was just a barefoot girl named Frances. Born in 1912 in the dust of Uvalde, Texas, Frances Octavia Smith didn't have a childhood. She had a survival story. Her parents were constantly moving, chasing work that never seemed to last. And Frances? She was just trying to find a place to land. At 14, she made a desperate choice. She eloped. She thought marriage was an escape. It wasn't. By 15, she was a mother. By 16, she was abandoned. Imagine being a teenage single mother in the 1,920 seconds. No money, no husband, just a baby boy named Tommy, and a crushing weight of shame. She worked anywhere that would take her. WMC radio, WREC, singing into a microphone late at night, hoping her voice might save her. But talent wasn't enough. The world didn't want a struggling single mom. They wanted a fantasy. A manager in Louisville pulled her aside and said, "You need something lighter, something with a smile in it." He gave her a name, Dale Evans. Dale was clean. Dale was strong. Dale didn't have a past. Frances didn't hesitate. She said yes. But she didn't realize that to become Dale Evans, Frances Smith had to die. And the baby in her arms? He was about to become the biggest secret in Hollywood. Hollywood wanted a myth. And myths don't have teenage sons. When Dale signed with 20th Century Fox, she was finally living the dream. But the executives were clear. A divorce? A child? That was career poison. So, they handed her a script. Not for a movie, but for her life. They told her, "Tommy isn't your son. He's your little brother." Think about that for a second. Every time she introduced him, every time she smiled for a reporter and said, "This is my brother Tommy," she felt something crack inside her chest. She tucked him into bed at night as a mother. But in the daylight, she had to deny him. She later admitted, "I worried I was teaching him to be ashamed of who he was." But the lie worked. Her star rose. The money came in. The radiant, single, all-American girl was a hit. But secrets in Hollywood are like ticking time bombs. She was living on the edge of a razor. One slip-up, one reporter digging too deep, and everything she built, the fame, the money, the safety for her son, would vanish overnight. She was trapping herself in a cage of her own making, and the lock was about to get much tighter. Then, she met Roy. On screen, their chemistry was electric, effortless. But behind the scenes, it wasn't a fairy tale romance. It was a collision of tragedies. In 1946, Roy's wife, Arline, died days after childbirth. The king of the Cowboys was suddenly a widower with 3 babies. He was shattered. Dale stepped in, not as a star, but as a friend. She knew what it meant to be broken. She helped him pick up the pieces. When Roy proposed, it wasn't with a grand speech. He was a man who had lost everything, asking a woman who had survived everything to help him rebuild. She said yes. To the public, it was legendary. The king and queen of the West. But the reality? Roy was grieving. Dale was hiding a secret past. and they were about to drag all that baggage into a marriage that would be tested by fire. They thought they had found their happy ending. They were wrong. 1950. Dale gives birth to Robin Elizabeth, her only biological child with Roy. But immediately, the room went quiet. Robin was born with Down syndrome and severe heart complications. In the 1950 seconds, doctors didn't say congratulations. They whispered. They told Dale to hide the baby, to send her to an institution, to forget she existed. They told her it would ruin her image. But Dale Evans remembered the pain of hiding her son Tommy. And this time, she refused. She brought Robin into the spotlight. She showed the world that this child, her child, was worthy of love. It was a quiet rebellion against a cruel society. But love couldn't fix a failing heart. Just before her second birthday, Robin died. Dale didn't just lose a daughter. She lost her anchor. Dale. Friends said she wandered the house like a ghost, clutching Robin's blanket, rocking back and forth in the nursery. But from that darkness, she wrote Angel Unaware, a book that changed how America looked at children with disabilities. She turned her pain into a mission. She thought she had paid her dues to grief. She thought the worst was over. Years later, the family is healing. They adopt a 2-year-old girl named Debbie. The house is full of music again. And then, a church bus crash. In an instant, Debbie was gone too. And so, 2 daughters, buried. The silence that fell over that house wasn't just quiet, it was deafening. How do you keep singing about faith when God keeps taking your children? The 1960 seconds rolled in. The fame was still there, but the warmth began to cool. Dale was the spiritual rock, the glue holding the family together, but rocks eventually crack. Roy was a good man, but he was a hard man, strict, distant. He was often gone touring, filming, being the hero for millions of other people. Dale stayed behind. She later admitted. He was gentle with the public, but at home, it was colder. She began to write in her journals about a profound loneliness. Imagine being surrounded by fans, by children, by staff, and feeling completely invisible. She had a role to play. The supportive wife, the grieving mother, the saint. But no one asked Frances how she was doing. She was drowning in the middle of a desert. And as the years dragged on, the question wasn't if she loved Roy. It was whether she had lost herself entirely to serve his legend. She was about to make a decision that would reclaim her voice, but it would require breaking the one rule Hollywood gave her 50 years ago. The Queen of the West was tired of the crown. In her later years, Dale Evans stopped pretending. She sat down with her family and finally let go of the shame. She spoke about Tommy, not as her brother, but as her son. Every time I called him Tommy instead of my son, I felt it crack something inside me, she confessed. She realized that the lie hadn't protected him. It had only taught him that his existence was a mistake. It was a brutal realization for a mother near the end of her life. She started telling the truth about everything, about the loneliness in her marriage, about the pressure to be perfect. She didn't do it to hurt Roy. She did it to heal herself. She stripped away the rhinestones and the fringe to show the scars underneath. She wanted the world to know that a full life includes suffering, and that the real bravery wasn't riding a horse. It was telling the truth when everyone expects you to lie. But there was one final goodbye she had to face. 1998. The cowboy who had outrun bad guys and ridden into glorious sunsets was fading. The house in Apple Valley grew quiet. No more cameras, no more horses, just the hum of medical machines. When Roy died on July 6th, the world mourned a legend. But Dale, she faced the quietest loneliness she had ever known. They had been partners for 50 years, through the lies, the losses, the fame, and the fracture. Now, she was alone. Without Roy, the happy trails were over. But in that silence, something remarkable happened. Dale didn't collapse. She finally found the space to just be. Not a wife, not a star, not a symbol. Just a woman who had survived. In her final months, Dale Evans didn't ask for applause. She surrounded herself with photos. Robin, Debbie, Roy, Tommy. She wasn't afraid of death. To her, it was just a reunion. So in last, she was another place. She passed away in 2001. She left behind a legacy, but not the one the studio designed for her. She left a message for every parent who has grieved, every woman who has felt silenced, and everyone who has had to wear a mask to survive. She wanted us to know that faith isn't the absence of pain. It's the decision to keep showing up, even when your heart is breaking. Dale Evans was more than a cowgirl. She was a warrior. The Stoic philosophers believed that we cannot control what happens to us, only how we respond. Dale Evans was handed a script full of tragedy, abandonment, deception, death. But she rewrote the ending. She chose to turn her grief into a map for others walking in the dark. And that brings me to, have you ever felt forced to hide a part of yourself just to fit into someone else's picture? Or have you carried a grief that felt too heavy to speak? Tell me your story in the comments below, because as Dale proved, silence is heavy, but sharing is freedom. Dale Evans fought for her truth and found peace. But not every Hollywood legend escaped the darkness. There is another star whose secret was so dark, it didn't just break her heart, it destroyed an entire dynasty. And you won't believe who was pulling the strings. Click this video right here to see the story Hollywood tried to bury next.